What was
Alhamdulillah.
the immediate journey after? Like that next 3 to 6 months of becoming a Muslim, incorporating that more into your life. What was that like?
To be honest, Canyon, I had a lot of struggles when I knew that I was going to become a Muslim. I started to worry at the fact that I don't know Arabic. I don't know how to read the Quran. I don't know how all these details of prayer work. So this actually was something that was stalling me a little bit. And some people say, in hindsight, this was shaitan possibly intervening as a last resort. But actually, I really enjoyed and I really embraced prayer. I found myself having really deep, intimate connections with God in prayer. And I'm talking about 20, 30, 40, sometimes an hour, 2 hours worth of prayer, in the final third of the night. This was happening to me on a very, very, very regular basis. I remember having a specific prayer where I was pursuing something that was really not a good thing to pursue. And I remember having that prayer, seeing shaitan right in front of me. And of course, that thing that I was pursuing turned out to be terrible anyways. You can hear in the background, we have the adhan. But it was a constant process. When you come from the West, I think a lot of people assume that becoming a Muslim means immediately you need to be perfect. But as a matter of fact, even the Muslims who've been born as Muslims, this is just a continuous process, right? This is a continuous purification of the heart, the mind, the body, and the soul. And so certainly in the first 3 to 6 months, there were a lot of changes. There was a lot more prayer. People were always very interested and intrigued around the path and their journey to get to Islam. But internally, there was a lot of stillness. Internally, there was a lot of contentment. Even though some people around me pushed back, some people around me found it very weird and arbitrary that I'd become a Muslim. And I think that is relative to their understanding of Islam. But thankfully, even since now we're 3 years down, a lot of these people have become very accepting and understanding, and they've learned that Islam is so much more than what the West propagates about it.
Hmm. How did you get over the internal struggles, the internal dialogue, the internal issues?
Mm. Kanyan, I had this epiphany or this revelation that I'm never going to be ready or I'm never going to be perfect. And so any further delays on my behalf are only to my own detriment, right? And again, these epiphanies and revelations, they just came in plain sight. They were not special moments. It was just something like, okay. The same way I realized now I'm going towards Islam was the same way I realized, wait, I'm never going to be perfect. And to this day, even though I would consider myself to be a lot more well-read and studied, and I've spent a lot of time amongst great scholars and sheikh, I'm still not perfect and I still make mistakes. And I've simply accepted within myself that this is the process, that we human beings make mistakes. I try to repent and I try to come back to the path.
Hmm. That seems to be an issue a lot of reverts face that I interview is
Mm,
this feeling that if they're not perfect, then
mm,
they're worthless almost. Like if I'm not a perfect Muslim, then I'm just a horrible Muslim. They start running this thought pattern, oh, I'm a bad Muslim, I'm a bad Muslim. And sometimes it comes from, you know, maybe you're surrounding yourself with the wrong Muslims who are critiquing you on these
mm,
tiny things. Like, did you not know that's haram? Then all of a sudden,
mm.
you've been a revert for a month. You're like, oh, I'm doing 1,000 things that are haram. And then they kind of crumble.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. I'm lucky that the people around me were more so encouraging and helping in every way, shape, or form that they could. But it was my own internal strife, it was my own internal expectations where I thought I needed to be this and I needed to be that. And then, I needed to be perfect. And again, we come from the Western world where there is so much residual um, badness that is not only readily available, but it's almost encouraged. In the Western world, if I think back to that, I was someone who was seeing many different women. I was someone who would consume alcohol. I'm someone who's consumed drugs. I'm someone who's smoked weed. I've done all of those things that happens in the Western world. And in the Western world, that's not a problem, right? But as soon as I came over to Islam, I thought like, oh, just I have to be perfect. And that was actually very difficult for me. And of course, there were some people that would have the idea in their head like, oh no, you can't do this without doing that. And so there was pressure on me. But thankfully, I had those good people around me who were able to say, it's okay if you made a mistake, right? Even those people who've been Muslims for 40 years, they still make mistakes. Even our teachers, they make mistakes. We're all human beings. And so in that sense, I would contribute, or I would add to the point that you make, is sometimes you're surrounded by the people who are critiquing you. And in fact, you want to be surrounded by the people who are encouraging you.